Hello and welcome to Rail Natter. Look at this, it's happening. It's episode 248. What should the Scottish Railway map look like 2? That's right. We're following up on our previous episode. Yeah, and this is indeed a bit of an unofficial pairing with last week as well, where we were looking at Isles connectivity. Well, absolutely pertinent to this, so hopefully something very useful. There's maps, there's discussions of planning, strategic networks. There is much in play, and I'm excited about all of it. Let me just drop the soundboard to this because I need to check whether why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? Okay, yeah, not sure how successful that was, but anyway, okay, fine. Don't need that anyway, do we? Right, so just in case there is a soundboard, let's get cracking, shall we? Without much further ado, really, it's just a reference to the fact that the first one of these, look at this, 248 back to episode 65. What should the Scottish Railway map look like? This is the amuse-bouche. You need to crack on with with watching that episode. If you come to this not live, then probably go back and watch that one, because I'm not going to go back to it. I'm not going to cover much of it of what we covered in it. No, far from it. I intend to get cracking because we've got plenty to cover tonight. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away, we are here very much to be talking about ScotRail, Scotland's railway. Things we're not going to be covering. Let's go big face briefly. Hello, everyone. I'm a mess. It'll be getting tidied up very soon. Things we will not be covering. We're not going to go into detail like station positions, particularly at this point, although we might for some of the things we talk. There's lots of stuff. We're not going to go into lots of detail about like the enhancements of the network that are needed, although we might touch on some of the themes as to how you work out what those should look like. There's lots of stuff we might not cover, and there is also only one of the things. There is one mapped omission that I am aware of in the map, and we'll talk about it when we get to it. It's only a little one, but it requires some thought, and I haven't, creating alignments, which spoiler alert, I have done. Takes a bit of time. Not as much time as consultancies will have, you'd think, for this stage, because I can work up a 100-kilometre alignment in probably about an hour and a half, depending on how fiddly the geography is. And I will always be better at a computer doing it, although it would be nice to put me in competition with a generative AI alignment generation tool and see who wins. But let's so we can talk about that at some point. As ever with these questions, chuck your thoughts in my direction. Questions as well. If you're like, how did you do that? How do you work that out? We're going to be going into some detail on alignments for this, because let's be honest, that's part of the good fun. Remember, everyone, if you've got a question or thought, do at my name in the YouTube chat, and it pops up nice and clearly, and I can then get stuck in. So let's miniaturise my face, shall we? We're here to talk about 2,730 kilometres of railway network and how it ought to be bigger. This is the size of the route kilometrage of the Scottish railway network. And it's not enough. Why is it not enough? Is it because I just want more railway? Well, a little bit. No, it's not, though. It's because, as we'll talk about, there is a fundamental strategic need for more rail to facilitate more mobility in the country. Like that is, if you want people and things to move around more, if you want a more vibrant economy, then you need to be able to move them around more. And the only way to achieve that is with railways. It is not by road. Roads have reached their capacity, and there is nowhere in the UK that's more obvious, actually, than on some of the strategic road network in Scotland, where you have a severe conflict between local traffic, long distance traffic, both in terms of people travelling for work, people travelling for education, people travelling for leisure, and locals travelling for leisure, and tourists in amongst the thick of it. Combine that with the heavy reliance on HGVs for goods movement across Scotland, like the severe over-reliance on that, and all of a sudden you have a concoction for a road network, that is at the end of its capacity. And we know that expanding that is the wrong thing to do, and the wrong thing to be doing. The wrong thing is being done right now in Scotland with the A9 dualling and with other projects to boot. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how. So let's just. I'll tell you what. Before we do that, though, let's just go back and very briefly remind ourselves of what in the hell we were talking about. So here we are. Shout out to Bentley. This is MicroStation. If you're not familiar with this is the tool that I use from all my design work. And Bentley MicroStation, a powerful tool, and one of the things we did last time was we were looking at, it was an imperfect but a fairly useful way of kind of fairly objectively looking at the gaps in the rail network. And we did this exercise by looking at the towns larger than 5,000 people, towns and cities larger than 5,000 people in Scotland, and then seeing where on the rail network there were obvious missing links, and this absolutely is one of the approaches that I have used. One of the tools, one of the inputs I've used into generating some of the big gaps, big missing links, major required projects that Scotland requires to finish its rail map and get its. By the way, what we're talking about is what Scotland's rail map might look like by the second half of this century, if not a little bit beyond. But what is absolutely achievable to kind of be thinking about this for the 2050s, and what's missing it. And so we can see some of those settlements up here. So sort of big gaps up in the northeast of Scotland, and also quite a lot down the east coast. Gaps and kind of missing links. Particular obvious ones. Forfar is a really obvious gap there. St Andrews, another fairly sizable town that is unconnected. More on that later. Hawick down here, of course, but otherwise, actually, the Scottish Railway network is pretty good at connecting up all of those those locations. The Borders Railway to Tweedbank and Gala was a major. Melrose and Gala was a major boon in joining a lot of those. Joining up one of the last major population centres onto the rail network. But there is more to be done, absolutely more to be done. And also, this isn't the only way to look at it. This is not the only way. As many point out, there is a lot to... people are asking if there's a pre-beaching map coming up. No, there's no... Beaching isn't even getting mentioned. Where's the clacks? Where's my clacks? Wait a minute. Beaching, you say? Yeah, I did have the I don't know what the sound balance is. Loud, I think. Why is that so loud? I was positive that it's. Let's try this. I'm guessing that's too loud. Yeah. Okay. Good. That was a bit better, wasn't it? If the sound is too loud, then do tell me. Yeah. This is only one part of the picture, and we're going to get into some of those other parts of the picture. Kind of without me screwing up my my windows. Now, and the first thing you have to do is really to think about what the rail network needs to look like. You need to forget about trains, actually. It's the first thing you need to do. If we're going to maximise the potential of the rail network, then we actually need to step back and forget trains altogether. Why is this? Well, people often ask me questions about conventional modelling. Conventional modelling is bobbins. It's useless. The Borders Railway, we've got stations that are seeing between 10 and 20 times the predicted footfall that was quoted in the original business case. So it's just not fit for purpose. It just doesn't. It's completely unfit for purpose, hopeless. And to develop integrated transport systems, you need to think about mobility in totality. In other words, if we're going to draw the future map of the railway network, we have to stop thinking about trains and start thinking about how many people and things move around the country today, and how many we expect will be moving around the country in decades forwards into the future. This is the key thing. And in doing that, you need to account for demographic shift, local and national spatial plans, very local town plans, industrial strategies at a regional and national level, the desire for economic development. You need to think about connectivity at the fringes of the core in Scotland. That means thinking about islands. And only then, when you've got that full picture of total mobility, ignoring how, whether it's road, air, rail, only when you've got that picture of mobility can you then start thinking, well, how would this mobility most suitably be satisfied? And then, once you've gone how best to satisfy that mobility, and by which I mean, I'll tell you what, we'll get to an example in a minute. So you've got that, you've got the situation where we've thought about total mobility. Things like modal shift targets, in fact, to my mind, that's the best way to do it, is you have a mode shift that the government intends to achieve. That then tells us how much movement will be facilitated by each mode of transport as a percentage of the overall total, both nationally, regionally, on a corridor-by-corridor basis, and then even down to street-by-street basis. So you can achieve, fairly straightforward series of numbers allow you to achieve a pretty specific and detailed understanding of what the national kind of transport network needs to look like. That gives us a network of transport corridors essentially agnostic of what the mode is, and then that tells us how our railway network needs to change. So we get to this point where suddenly we're starting to get this picture of, okay. So from all this, and I talk about this in the book, right? This is something that anyone watching this is familiar with the book will know that this is the way to develop transport networks and then understand how rail fits into that picture. And that's how you then go, well, rail is the most efficient and effective means of carrying large amounts of stuff. It's the most effective means of carrying people over long distances. For example, over long distances, buses are frankly ineffective at driving modal shift away from private cars because they lack the speed. They lack the capacity. Buses get stuck in the same queues that cars do. And even for the highest capacity double-decker, like Scottish CityLink, kind of the double-decker coaches that you can get, you still need to run 4 of those to move the same number of people as one train does. So even those ones that have like 88 passengers or something, they're huge buses. You still need 4 of those to carry as much as one kind of fairly short train. You can still you could go for a 9 car or a 10 car, and you've got 8 coaches being carried by that train. So to drive modal shift from private to public transport on any long distance corridor, as per the Scottish Government's own targets, there has to be a railway. That's fundamental, right? So if you have a transport corridor that already has both road and rail, so you're a strategic corridor. The good thing about lots of Scotland is that it's there is a very set series of corridors because of geography, where places where you basically don't have a choice, all the mobility goes along that very narrow corridor along a glen of some kind, because that's the geography. Well, that's kind of true. It's true here, and in some instances we might want to breach some of that geography, but for the most part, following the geography allows you to paint the map of corridors independent of mode. So if you have a transport corridor that includes both road and rail, predicting total mobility allows us to go, well, okay, that we know total mobility, we know what percentage of that needs to be carried by rail because of modal shift targets set by the government and agreed by us, the people. Well, then we know the railway needs to achieve this level of capacity. We know what specification the railway must achieve. It's like, well, if it's this capacity, it has to do this. Likewise, if there's or rather on the flip side of that, if there's a strategic road without a paralleling railway, then long-term modal shift targets are simply impossible to achieve without building a railway along that corridor. Now, building a railway along that corridor might literally be build a railway along that corridor, or it might be do things elsewhere to achieve an equivalent or an alternative route by rail that is still better than the road, even if the railway is not parallel to it. But broadly, for the most part in Scotland with its long distances, most of the case, that means you need a parallel railway. Let's take an example. It's time to get a blackboard out, and it's also time for me to right-click here and change my little pointer to a chalk. Let's get chalk up. Let's do this, folks. The Wacom is out. So let's take, if you've got Scotland, let's take Perth. There's Perth, going up to Inverness. So there we go. Perth to Inverness. Now, for information, if we get up the Scotland map, Perth to Inverness is, so from here, so Perth is absorbing Glasgow and Edinburgh traffic, and some East Coast stuff, and basically providing the key corridor northwards to Inverness, basically the main trunk link to the Northern Highlands, right? So to northwest Scotland. That's the main trunk link. And yeah, it wobbles around the cairngorms, but that's because the cairngorms are very spiky. So it has to do that. It's already one of the highest roads in the country as it goes over Dromochta. So the A9 corridor, right? That is what we're going to call it. The A9 corridor. Obviously, the A9 is there, as is the Highland Main Line. So we have a paralleling railway. Great, fantastic. So what does that? So what do we then know? So we know that we've got on this side we've got the A9 road here. There's the A9, and we've also got the Highland Main Line. So there's the Highland Main Line doing its thing along here. Lovely. We've got the Highland Main Line as well. Now, we know via survey that the A9 carries around about 10,000 vehicles a day, kind of making that journey end to end, of which around sort of 70% of those are private cars. So 7,000 are kind of private cars a day. We know that average car occupancy is about 1.5, which means you've got around about, goes back up to 10,500 people per day. So let's just go. So that's 10,000. Sorry, scroll that there. So we've got a number there of 10,500 is how many people are using the A9 every day, right? So that gives us that's total in both directions. This isn't passengers per hour per direction. This is daily at the moment, but you can see how you can split that down to per hour per direction. So and this is nice. Robert Haynes is here saying, I did the maths years ago, taking all the cars off Dromoctor would need 2 times 9 car trains an hour. Yeah, so it's eminently achievable. So let's keep carrying on with this. So 10,500. Currently, the Highland Main Line carries around 5,500 passengers per day. These are the best figures I could find, by the way. It's incredibly difficult to source this data. This is a major problem in the UK, is that this data should be just open and accessible. It's extremely frustrating. Michael C is saying, don't forget about freight. Yes, I'm excluding freight from this little bit of chalkboard thing because freight is a bit fiddlier to calculate with. But yes, you're right. Those remaining 3,000 vehicles are freight vehicles. So for now, we're just going to look at passengers to kind of follow the example. So here's our total number. So of this, that means that in total, along our kind of corridor here, we have about 16,000 people traveling daily on this corridor, right? So at the moment, rail accounts for 34% of that passenger flow, of the people flow along there. So if we want to reduce private traffic, this is absolutely crucial. So getting rid of private vehicles is crucial for a couple of reasons. Well, for many reasons. One of them is actually freeing up the road. So those strategic journeys, the people who are driving long distance, they're filling up the road for people who are making local journeys. And actually, that's not good. We want to get rid of those long distance journeys because then actually you are freeing up the road for people who are making local journeys where rail is not a useful mode of transport for them. So what we actually want to do is take all those long distance journeys off rail as much as we can. But we know that when it's competitive, rail can have private car demand, right? So before talking about what the actual future map might look like, let's keep going with this example because I think it's a useful way for us to go, oh, okay, how do we think about this mobility? So let's draw another. So this is 2025-ish. Actually, it's probably like 26. Actually, some of those numbers are like 2017, I think, but like for whatever, doesn't matter. So let's say that's 2025 roughly. So let's go. We're going for Inverness, and we're going down to Perth. Perth. So, hopefully this is useful, by the way. So, yeah, the A9 second carriageway through Burnham has the audacity to smash through the station carpet. Yeah, it's absolutely and totally unacceptable, yeah. So, other people pointing out coaches are much less accessible for those with kind of mobility issues. Yeah, absolutely. If you're disabled or have a wheelchair or whatever, coaches are not ideal. So, let's take this example. So let's jump to 2050, right? 2050. Total mobility on that corridor is expected to rise by, say, 50% by 2050, right? So if we're overall increasing everything by 50%, so that means that everything, this 16,000 is going up to, what is it, going up to, whatever that is, 24,000, is it? Is that about? Yeah, that is right, 24,000. So this number is now 24,000. So that's that. But Scottish Government targets are to reduce road traffic from today's baseline by 20%. So that means that not only are you going 55,000 plus 50%, but also you're accommodating a reduction from the 10,500 of 20% plus what would otherwise have been growth on the road, which results in you having a railway here. There's our railway, the Highland Main Line here. Highland Main Line needing to haul 15,600 passengers a day. And that's not doing what Robert rightly did and saying, we're going to take all of it. People are saying that my diagram is a little bit yonic. Jade H, I am so sorry. Think of it as a cocoa bean. Let's call it that. So there's no way that I was going to draw this on the screen and without realizing. Obviously, I was going to end up being. Anyway, right. As people will shout, take the damn estradiol, right? Okay, right, fine. So you've got the Highland Main Line, you've got the A9. There we go. 15,600 people are going to need to take the train. Now that's around about 3 times more. That's about 3 times what the Highland Main Line is currently carrying. It's not necessarily that much. It's not necessarily that we need to increase the railway's capacity by that much, because the railway is quite reasonably, or could be reasonably underutilized. But we know to achieve 15,600 passengers a day requires, and also that's not to mention with all the freight, we will need to double track the whole Highland Main Line, which is frankly a completely obvious and necessary thing to do. We will need, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Obviously, movement of goods much more complicated, but take the same approach and you end up with that picture of total mobility. So on corridors where rail already exists, we can do these calculations pretty straightforward to understand what the railway needs to look like. So to carry 3 times the number of passengers that it does today, the Highland Main Line needs longer trains, it needs overhead electrification, it needs double track throughout. And to drive that modal shift, journey times would need to be at least as good on rail as they are by car. So at the moment, it takes 3 hours to get from Glasgow to Inverness, whereas it takes 3.5 hours by rail. So that's a half hour that we need to save between Glasgow and Inverness. And electrification would do a sizable chunk of that, actually. But there are bits and pieces where we need to cut corners and so on and so on. So this is how you shape the picture on where there are existing rail links along these strategic corridors, right? So this is, I just wanted to kind of shape this up here to help us to kind of build that picture up, right? So we have we have one way of looking. So, right, we know where there are railways, and that's the approach on existing corridors. So I'm not going to go through existing corridors where there is rail too much more, but that gives you an idea of how to paint that picture, right? But thinking about future mobility requires vision, not just data. So, for example, within 2 years of its opening, 70% of passengers on the Borders Railway said they wouldn't have been travelling in the area at all if it wasn't for the new line. So you don't measure, here's my favourite quote that I love to give, which is, you don't measure the need for a bridge by counting the people who swim across the river. Now, why do I say that? Well, it's because there are strategic gaps. And how do we know where those strategic gaps are? Well, thankfully, the road network tells us where they are. Because if we go back to our map of Scotland, we could quite easily go, well, okay, where are the strategic links? Where are the main roads? Where are those trunk roads where there is no railway? Because if the mobility is such that it justifies a trunk road, i.e. a strategic, centrally administered, I was going to say Edinburgh, but actually Transport Scotland's in Glasgow, a centrally administered, nationally strategic road, then there should be a railway line paralleling it. That is, absolutely locked in and unavoidable as a truth, right? So where are some of these gaps? Where are some of these strategic gaps? How do we know where these links are? Because, well, quite straightforward, really. We can look around, we can find areas where we've got a trunk road with no railway next to it, and that fairly quickly paints a picture of where the railways need to be. Now, it's not quite as much as I would love to put a railway next to every single trunk road. The advantage of the railway is that it's faster than road, and so if your average speed on a road is 45 miles an hour, you can actually have a railway that isn't directly parallel to it, but that achieves much of the same thing if there isn't if it's not skipping a centre of population or a centre of industry. So the railway can cheat in that sense, and it can achieve more than a road does along a corridor. So you can have one railway line that actually does the equivalent of 2 or more strategic bits of infrastructure. So, having done that, where are some of these missing links? Let's start, shall we? And the first is perhaps an obvious and well-known one, Tweed Bank to Carlisle. It's the most well-known missing strategic link because the A7, if we zoom in, you'll see the A7, which is one of the in fact, the busiest single carriageway road in terms of goods traffic, and it gets battered and smashed to bits as a result, constantly closed for resurfacing and repair. Major strategic link down across the Scottish border as well, and actually the main link for a lot of people in the Scottish borders to where they do shopping, because much as the border seems to be is a fixed point in some people's mind, actually, a lot of people in the Scottish borders travel down to Northern England to do their shopping or to go to Manchester Airport or such, and we should facilitate that mobility. People don't care about borders. They should be allowed to travel where they like and what suits them. And a lot of people in Hawick, Langham, Newcastleton travel south rather than north, and we should build a railway to facilitate that mobility. So the first strategic link is the 90-kilometre Tweedbank to Carlisle line. Now, let's just talk a little bit about... Let's use this first line as an example of where we're going to go from here. I forgot to tell you to actually put on screen the connectors that we did. So last episode of this, episode 65, we had all these connectors. So we had the kind of the main city links, which we'll talk about a bit more in a minute. When we had the links like that, but including some of the other big towns. So those, you see the map gets a little bit more diverse at that point. Then we painted a network that accounts for all of the 10 to 50,000 towns. So they're sort of still big towns, and you start seeing where there are some gaps. Certainly the northeast of Scotland, major gaps there. You can see there's some gaps through kind of Forfar and what is this? I forget what is it? I've had an absolute mind blank of what is south of Aberdeenshire but north of Fife. Everyone shout at me, shout things at me. I'm having a mind blank. The Central Belt obviously is very busy, and for the most part the network is pretty effective. And then you've got the challenges in the borders. Hawick has a particular gap here. And accordingly the gap, but the other gap here is Dumfries across to Stranraer is a major gap there. So you start seeing where there are these gaps through this method alone, but then paint the picture even more with the 5,000 population, so 5 to 10,000 population as well, and you start seeing other gaps appearing also. So this paints the picture quite neatly of some of the gaps and challenges on the network. But as we described, we've kind of gone a bit beyond that. I forgot to do that bit because that's kind of important. So if we've got all of our towns here, what I want to do is start painting pictures of, first of all, I'm going to put in my alignments. So let's just do a bit of this. Let's avoid putting the high speed, we are going to put that in because everyone loves to see the high speed stuff, don't they? So borders completion. So if you have the Borders Railway here, actually, you know what I need to do is get the yellow up of the Scottish Rail network. So let's get the existing network up so it's a bit clear. So the existing network is, you can see the existing network in, and let's just make that, forgive me, let me just make that white because I think that'll make everyone's life a bit easier. Existing network, let's make that, let's make it kind of a light grey, like this, maybe even a bit darker, this. There we go. Lovely. So the existing rail network shown in kind of light grey. So you can see that very nice. Let's also get rid of the outline because we don't need to see the outline of Scotland. People know where it is. So do shout me if it's not clear. People are saying Stonehaven, Montrose. So, right. Angus. Thank you. Thank you, Monty. It's Angus. That's the word I was looking for. Angus. An Angus burger. It's Angus. Yes. So, the existing rail network runs down. Let's switch off what I just switched on here, by the way. Let's just switch this off first to show you all. Here's the existing railway network. Marvellous. Let me delete that because you don't need that. Existing railway network, marvellous. So if we keep going down here, what about... so the borders is down to Tweedbank, and through my actual day job, I developed two alignments, two major alignment options and lots of little braiding. So as I've possibly done before on the Welsh railway map, when I'm doing an alignment, even when it's quick and nasty, this was fairly detailed alignment work, but still fairly quick and snippy. I'll just kind of iterate a few different options and kind of braid them out and things that look broadly sensible based on aerials and other kind of receptors that I'm aware of, and sort of mix and match and give options for, you could do faster this bit, you could do slower this bit, what are the strategic aims, and then you can sometimes do a thing like, well, what's the quickest alignment and then versus the slowest alignment, and also things like where do you want the alignment to go through Hawick, for example. I'm going to switch off the town shading just to make your life a little bit easier. And so coming south from Tweedbank, we could go into great detail about some of these and dedicate an episode to each of these. In fact, I think I did one for Borders. Have I done one for Borders already? I can't remember. So anyway, you can see, and one of the things you do is, one of the first things I do is draw an alignment that broadly follows the existing railway, because you go, okay, what could that achieve? But then I also then go, well, okay, if I want to cut that corner, what does that look like? And I want to get rid of this kink, what does that look like? And I want to see if I can get around Hawick without bothering the people in the town. Does that work, and would that be achievable or useful for the people of Hawick? Questions of this nature. And then from Hawick southwards, there are two options. There is the A7 option, completely new, which then connects into Langham and gives you a link to Langham, which might be more politically palatable because it ties in more constituencies, more bits of Scotland, and therefore might find more political traction. Or do you broadly follow the corridor of the former railway with some serious corner cutting, particularly over the top of the hill, because when you electrify a railway, you can do some of that corner cutting, not a thing you can do without wires. The thing about corner cutting on a wibbly railway that goes through a hill is that every time you cut a corner, you're increasing the steepness of the railway, which is, for a railway that climbs over a hill like the one going over here, you do, that's a real challenge if you don't have an electric railway. Electrification basically flattens hills out. That's why it's so powerful. It's so important for modern railways. Anyway, you get the picture. So that's the railway as it is there. But let's just skip to our final views. And I'm spoiling you a little bit by hinting at some of the other stuff to go. But that's what our railway would look like if we pick the 80-mile-an-hour capable route that broadly follows the existing railways, follows broadly the existing railway over the hill via Newcastleton. Then this is what you get. You get this link here. This white line, by the way, we've already covered this in episode 222, which is the high-speed line. I can make your life easier by switching it off, but it is there. That's going there. So for anyone who's wondering, that's what that is. Episode 222, if you're wondering to remember that. But yeah, we've gone through that, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Borders Railway. But what else? If we've got 90 kilometres of railway from Tweedbank to Carlisle, what's next? And I do spot that CNER is in the chat. Because the next link, which is a crucial strategic link, is the 71-kilometre railway between Dice and Fraserburgh. Now, let's get our OS map up, because what am I talking about? I'm talking about north of Aberdeen. The A90 strategic route that goes up from Aberdeen to Ellen, well, actually, the A90 bypasses Ellen, the railway would not, of course. Ellen, Cruden Bay, Peterhead, and up to Fraserburgh. Absolutely, these are two major ports, major part of Scotland's future energy, renewable energy industry, as it specifies. Major sort of strategic link, and also a lot of population. I think it's about 50,000 people that you're directly connecting onto a railway if you put it there. It's a major, obvious missing link, and what you might do to connect it up to other places in the future is up for debate, but certainly I would say 71 kilometres to connect up to Fraserburgh. I would say a timetable bus would fix the problem on the sort of Moray coast through the wonderful places like wonderful places like Cullen, Portsoy, Bamford McDuff are great. There's so much to do, and it's a wonderful coastline, but I think bus would achieve that. But rail to Fraserburgh is critical, and as we'll talk about later, there are benefits to, but if you think about bus and rail together, then you start thinking about improved core speeds that railways provide, and it actually makes the buses more desirable as well. So really important to think about that. So the mighty number 98 bus, says Robert Haynes. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, very likely. No, it's not a countdown, Samuel Wilkins. I'm so sorry. Sam W is saying that they remember me pointing out the bombs at Longtown, and Owen O'Neill asks, in terms of sustained gradient, what's the difference in an acceptable percentage gradient for wires versus no wires? Difficult to answer that one without being a bit obfuscatory, because it depends a lot on the curvature as well. But it suffice to say, it's the difference between a viable and non-viable option for going over the top of the hill. So you get your 80 miles an hour over the top of the hill by cutting a lot of corners and steeping up the railway, and you cannot do that without it being electrified. Your journey times for a diesel train would be substantially lower. So Samuel Wilkins hoping that was a countdown. No, I'm afraid not. It's in order of my little narrative that I'm weaving here. So yeah, next clue that it's the A90 corridor north of Aberdeen. Peterhead, Fraser, very important harbour towns, very industrially very important for the renewable sustainable energy industry, and for various bits of kind of transitioning the fossil fuel industry and hydrogen projects and all sorts. It reconnects the largest regional population in Scotland without a rail connection. And yeah, it's about 50,000 people would be relinked back into the rest of the country, as well as this massive boost in goods haulage capacity for various industry in the northeast. I've narrated a video describing the benefits of this. In fact, 2 videos describing the benefits of this that you can find on the CNER website, probably. And if you can't, then pester them to eventually go public. No, I think they're on YouTube, actually. You can go and watch them. So that's a key missing link. And for anyone curious what that looks like, let me just go back to my construction views. So the alignments here are heat. So the light colors mean it's faster. So more towards blue is slow, more towards yellow and red is fast. Now, in about 45-50 minutes, I was able to draw up for the most, with a couple of PSRs through kind of key points, so particularly coming out of Dice and getting through the already constructed Aberdeen Western Peripheral route stuff, which kind of locks your alignment a bit. But north of there, other than getting round the corner at Ellen and also turning the corner at Peterhead, I can achieve 100-mile-an-hour alignment right the way through from north to south without causing pretty much any pain at all. It's just agri-land. There might be some receptors in there. Those who know can pester me on it. Thank you, Spanners, for coming in. CNER is pointing out that they're on YouTube. They are on YouTube, and you can see them in the chat, and click on it and go to YouTube. And Michael C, as a Spanner, has dropped the link there. So, we'll open a separate tab so you don't lose the stream. But anyway, you can achieve 100 miles an hour, and the journey times on a 71-kilometre railway that sustains 100 miles an hour, well, what are they? I'll be telling you at some point soon, because I'm very curious myself, and I'd love to have a look at what a timetable might look like. But I suspect better than has been suggested by previous consultants, frankly. And the difference in terms of what damage you cause by doing, the difference between going for 75, 70, 80 versus 100 miles an hour in terms of alignment, even if you don't use that alignment to its maximum, the environmental impact is negligible, but the benefits are enormous. Over that distance, 71 kilometers, you're gaining major benefits, major benefits. So seriously good bit of railway you could put there, and direct enough that it would be appealing. That's a really key point. You're talking about creating an appealing bit of railway. I have not forgotten Pit Medden. Pit Medden is joining the party. Anyway, a very appealing bit of railway and a key strategic link. How many of your alignments are informally closed alignments? Both of these that I've described make extensive use of the broad path that former railways cover. So, for example, you see here, you can see the former alignment, and I'm decidedly skipping it here. You can see that I'm dodging it, and this is recommended by multiple other people, skipping the curves here, dodging them entirely before rejoining, but making broad use of the alignment because the infrastructure and development has followed those patterns. But again, you can see cutting the corners in a few places. Actually, we've left the mainline railway here, so you can see we've actually abandoned the main line and are whizzing along north of it. Before we arrive at Ellen. In Ellen, the existing railway goes off to do other things, and we can... and also there's a tight curve that has got a load of houses on it, so you can't do that. But what you can do is dig up this golf course, because who cares about golf courses? They can put it somewhere else. That's the point of a golf course. It's just a field. The railway will then follow around the current corner. And again, you can see existing alignment, skip the existing alignment. The benefit of skipping existing alignments in this example is actually that you avoid, the railway is further away from sensitive receptors like this house or some of the, planting that's going on in this field, and particularly if it's been rewilded, things like that. You can actually, there are benefits to dodging the existing alignment. So yes, there is an existing alignment, but you can, it should never be bound by it. So yes, there we go. And rightly being pointed out, of course, the Foremountain and Buchan Way is a fantastic cycle route that I've cycled myself when I was a wee toddler, not literally. And actually, the benefits of the railway not sitting on top of it are also that you retain that link as well. Although where you are gobbling up, you would build a parallel cycleway. So yeah, opportunities abound on that front. So yeah, 71 kilometres. That's an absolutely key link. Dice Fraserburgh, an absolutely key strategic link. But there's another gap as well. And that gap, let's go back to our map. Let's go down here. And you saw it earlier when I was looking at our episode 65 analysis. A absolutely critical corridor here, which is connecting through Dumfries and Galloway to get from Dumfries to Stranraer, the Port Road, as it used to be called. So this is the this is another key missing link. You know, the A75 corridor linking Dumfries and England with Stranraer and the ferry to Northern Ireland. This route has a strategically beneficial at a UK level, given the need for a robust link directly to Belfast. The A75 is also acknowledged as chronically short of capacity, particularly for goods crossing the North Channel here. So, you know, a key strategic link for the UK, and therefore UK funding should be part of the mix in closing this gap. But it is a critical gap, and it is a 96-kilometre gap. So getting from Dumfries to Stranraer, and probably a little bit further around the corner to get to the coast port up the side of the coast, or investing in the harbour to make the harbour at Stranraer work. I suspect going up the coast and taking the railway up the coast is probably the right thing to do. So key strategic link that is missing. And what does that look like? Well, let's head down here, and you'll notice something a bit different about this one, which is it's a different colour. So the default line that I've been using on these is assuming 100-mile-an-hour alignment on both. So it's a 100-mile-an-hour alignment up to Fraserburgh. It's a 100 plus kind of, but with lots of 80-mile-an-hour restrictions on the way down to Carlisle. So the border's completion, but because of its strategic nature, I've actually gone for, and even if you wouldn't use it this way because you want it to be 100 miles an hour to maximise the capacity and get that freight through there, then I've gone for 125 miles an hour to get yourself a link through. Okay, a little bit slow to get through Dumfries, and again, you've got a fantastic cycle link to the hospital that you need to make sure you're paralleling with a cycle access, but and you know, again, there are benefits to skipping out on the former alignment, which is weirdly enough shown here as a bit of railway. It's not an existing bit of network. It's very much former railway there. Anyway, and here it is, 125 miles an hour. And if you want to know following existing railway, this does not follow the existing railway much at all. You know, it does a couple of places here and there, but for the most part, and this was a bit of an art of the possible, because I pretty much stuck to 100 mile an hour, which is a 2,200 meter radius, to see what you can achieve whilst minimizing impact right the way through this corridor, and it is achievable. You can get 125 miles an hour. You know, there are a couple of options about how you get through the Galloway Hills, or at least approach them. And actually tunneling, I would say, is one of the opportunities and options. Do not rule out doing big tunnels, although, you know, don't assume that it does work either. But I have in this instance. Making your way through, you can, you know, and for the most part, the benefit of agri-land is that it's fine to put railway on it for the most part. And yeah, you can achieve. So yeah, and you can see where I've started braiding. Actually, I started from this end and I started braiding. And I thought, you know what? Let's just see what I can do with 125, and I managed it. But I did start braiding with 100 miles an hour, and even there are even some more braids with lower speeds, kind of. And these kind of like making use of, again, you can make use of road corridors as well when you've got some of these lower speeds. So you can achieve this along here, and then tying in to connect up here. And I haven't actually drawn it here, but I would say extra kilometers to get yourself up to the deep water port further up the valley, up the fjord to connect up here. So I would say it'd be a very good idea to get the railway further up the fjord. Rightly, as Robert Haynes is saying, you'd have to blast a channel out of rock to get modern ferries into Stranraer. The deep water stuff, much cheaper to take the railway up to Cairnryan. Yeah, agreed. I think that's what you're doing. I've not drawn that here, but that's certainly an extra gap that I've not included that I would need to include, is getting the railway up there. I think that's a really important thing to do, actually, is create that connection. So for anyone, and there's David Allen, there's a bit of discussion about getting across to Ireland from the island of Ireland from the mainland. Let me just suggest there's an episode on that way back at the start. Do dig that episode up. Plenty of fun stuff for you to have a look at on that episode, where we talked about the best way to get across to Ireland. Spoiler alert, it's not actually up here if you're going to have a fixed link. But yeah, more on that later. Anyway, so that's the A75. What else have we got? Well, let's talk about links east and west and to the Isles, because there's a bit to say on this, you see. As we see with the previous gaps, kind of connections to Scotland's port towns, you know, particularly up to Peterhead and Fraserburgh, and with Stranraer, connections to the port towns serve key economic goals, and this is very much true on the west coast as it is in the east. And when I say the west coast, I mean up, you know, on the up in the Highlands. So not Stranraer as the connection to Ireland, but also up in the Highlands and the connections to the Hebrides and the Isles up there. So actually, there's a question which I'm going to catch. Les Chegwin is asking, reprocuring that agri-land where the new alignments go, can landowners negotiate or refuse, or is there a process by which government can say we are taking this at X price? Well, both. I'd say that one of the good things you can do is, if you're going along there and you go to farmers, and so when they built the Selby diversion, see previous episodes on the Selby diversion, you can and should start by saying, okay, we are going to build a railway here, but that will sterilise, that will isolate you from these fields, farmer, and it will also isolate the farm on the other side from those fields. So can you do a swap where those fields go back to that farmer and those fields go to that farmer, and will that, rather than us building you a load of connections under the railway, we can maybe do some of that. So there's a lot of negotiation that should happen that we've forgotten how to do in the UK, because we do just default to compulsory purchase, for better or worse, and rather actually for worse. So yes, we do have compulsory purchase as an option, but we shouldn't fall onto it as easily as we sometimes do. It's sometimes seen as a tool to negotiate with NIMBYs, to get past NIMBYism. Have a look at how well that's gone on HS2. Not. So I think there are opportunities for us to start with a genuine negotiation of, look, we want to put a railway here. We realise that's a massive pain in the ass to you, but can we do some negotiations here of flipping their fields to you, their fields to you, and then also give you a bung of cash, much cheaper than making enemies of them. And also CNER is pointing out that money can be raised with land value capture on farmland, and this was a success on the Northumberland line. Thank you. Yeah, in some cases you might find farmland is right. You might want to go, actually, this farmland's flat. It's reasonably well drained. It's in a situation where it's not that the farmer is moving on, perhaps, or there's not an obvious line of succession for that land. Perhaps we're going to build some new housing and actually build a new little town here, and we'll put a railway station. We'll have all the fields around it linked to that landowner becoming connected to the railway, providing value by creating a new connection, rail connected little town. There are these opportunities. Thinking big. This is why you have to think about that bigger spatial plan and things like how many new houses do we need in this region, and could we achieve that with a directly rail connected little settlement, utilising some of the agri land that we've made a bit of a mess of with our railway. The other good thing about that is then you can use that land as a construction compound first for the railway, and then put the town in the area that had the construction compound. Robert Haynes is saying, did someone say Metroland and everyone else in the UK government is saying no? Correct, Robert. Yeah, thank you. So links east-west. Let me get back on course. So of the three major ports on the rural west coast, which I'll tell you what, let's bring those up. So the three major rural ports are roughly in line with these white lines. Oban here, Malig actually here, not Fort William, because Fort William's hidden bloody miles away up into nowhere. So Malig is a key major port, and Ullapool as well is a major port. For kind of both passenger and freight. There are other freight terminals. Loch Inver is quite a major freight terminal up the coast from Ullapool, for example. But the three major kind of coastal ports away from the Clyde area and up the coast. So Oban, Malig, and Ullapool are the three. So two of those already benefit from rail links. That not only enhances their attractiveness for tourists, Oban, perfect case study in this, but also enables goods traffic to be moved, not just by road but by rail. This is not done on either of those. It's done a little bit up on the West Highland line, but very much not necessarily done to Oban. And actually, there should be much more goods using that connection. The trouble is, whilst breathtaking, the line to Oban is slow. From Glasgow, the train is an hour slower than driving, and it has very limited capacity. It's a single-track railway. As we talked about before, cutting corners to reduce the distance and speed up trains would actually have the opposite effect, as it would greatly increase already aggressive gradients. So the long-term solution for the line to Oban is to pair upgrades with electrification. Yes, I think we should absolutely electrify to Oban. And this acts to flatten steep climbs and very much enables more trains to run on the same tracks. Yes, electrify to Oban. It's not that crazy a thing to do. If we get the map up here, look at where the line up to Oban is. Well, the line is already electrified up to... So this line's already electrified. So all you're doing is electrifying up the connection. Okay, it's a long distance, but it's not so crazy. You've got electrification much of the route out of Glasgow, so the really busy, complicated bit. It's just the rural bit that you need to put wires up, and frankly, a lot of it's out in the open and quite straightforward. geologically interesting for the piling and such. But again, you're not in busy urban environment. It is achievable, and electrification would absolutely be a major contributor to speeding that journey up, and allowing you to think about cutting corners where it's possible to do so, where you can do some clever civil engineering. So where are we? So yes, so another challenge you've got in this area. So that's Oban. So we've talked about Oban. Another challenge you've got stems from the lack of a direct connection from the West Highland Line to Edinburgh and the east. This adds an hour and a half to journeys from Edinburgh versus the equivalent trip by car. That's a massive extra lump. An hour and a half is loads of extra. So that's a big problem. Also, nice. Al Storer is pointing out there's loads of major trunk electricity links in the area because there's loads of hydroelectric. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, this could just be powered by stuff next to the railway. Like, it's quite feasible to just get this stuff powered nice and easy. That's all fairly straightforward. Powering that stuff, not too worried about. So there used to be a direct link via Crieff and Glen across from Perth. And as you'll see here, I was doodling. I was doing some doodling here about, could I get a railway line to connect up to Crianlarich from Perth? And actually, to be honest, this connection is rubbish. I would do it north of Perth so that you kind of had a strategic link for trains coming for people coming from Fife, and those coming from Aberdeen, actually, to go north a little bit and then across. But I had a bit of a think about this, and I think that yes, there used to be a direct link, but I think that the lack of intermediate population and the really sensitive terrain would make it really hard to get that line sold, to make that line work. I think it'd be really difficult. People are asking about the spiral loop. No, that's not a spiral loop. That's just me playing with radii and seeing what can fit where. It's one way of doing it. The other way is to create chamfers and stuff, but sometimes I just make a circle the right radius and kind of move it around and go, does that fit here? Does that fit, could I get that to fit here between this bit of this road and this bit of this road? Oh yeah, it does work. That sort of thing. So I think it would be very difficult and maybe just not an environmental, not justifiable from an environmental perspective to do that link, even though it is a very clear and obvious strategic gap. But why do I say that you could do that? Why do I think that you cannot do that and still make the rail network work? Well, it's because I think from the southeast, improvements between Edinburgh and Glasgow, particularly if we get our nice high-speed line, see episode 222, if we get this high-speed line built, that means that you can get from Edinburgh to Glasgow in 25 minutes or whatever. That massively reduces and also if you've then got a good quick link that gets you in and allows you to hop on the train because you've built the kind of the connecting main line, the connecting station with Glasgow to get across to Queen Street and get northwards, or wherever the high speed station ends up. Then you can, and you've then done the improvements to Oban, to the line to Oban. That would then make rail competitive from Edinburgh, and then from the northeast. So from the likes of Aberdeen, travel to the west coast could be via Inverness and the next of our big gaps, which is the A82 corridor between Inverness and Fort William. Oh, yes. So, where is the next big gap? The next big gap is a major strategic gap between Inverness and Fort William, and this is a gap that was highlighted by our episode 65. So Inverness to Fort William. This is substantial. We're talking about 86 kilometres. Inverness to Fort William. That is a major bit of railway, right? Seriously major bit of railway. And let's have a look at it. So, I've got so many tabs going, everyone. Hopefully this is all working. You know what would be funny is if you hadn't been seeing my screen this whole time. That would have been really embarrassing, but no, we're doing all right. So, this is there's the question of why not build the much shorter link between the Highland Main Line and the West Highland Line at Lullenloughlagan. The terrain here would be... Well, okay, let me tell you why. One of those reasons why is the fact that there is a huge amount of tourist demand along the Great Glen, and building a railway that would directly serve the Great Glen would be a very good idea. Not necessarily because of the end-to-end connections, but by literally merit of the fact that the railway would go through the Great Glen and you'd get people off the road, off the A82. That would be... so the fact that it goes along the Great Glen is part of the reason you build it through the Great Glen. It's for that strategic tourist connection. And whilst there is some tourist merit on the big cycle thingy along here and so on, you can achieve that link with buses quite competitively because it's shorter. So that's my justification, is that actually you want the railway to go through the Great Glen because it is in and of itself, Loch Ness, the bloody Loch Ness Monster, is enough of a massive tourist draw that you want the railway to follow that route. That's why. It's one of the busiest corridors of tourist movement in the country, and the single carriageway road is severely congested at peak time. Upgrades to the road would be extremely disruptive, and any such efforts, if you're going to, add passing lanes or whatever, just don't do that. Just any such efforts would be far better directed to the construction of a railway line following it, and you would follow the road pretty closely, other than where you don't. There'd be a bit of tunnelling to deal with the two nice little dips that go in here. So both at Drumnadrochit and at Invermorriston, where you've got these wee dips, kind of these connections. So the first is where you've got the River Enric heading up towards into Glen Urquhart. And the other is the Invermorriston connection that takes you up to Glenmoriston and to some serious hill walking and some very difficult terrain, which I had a lot of fun on a few years back. Whoa, some good hill walking up there. Anyway, so that's why you do that. That's why you put it there. Now, this would be how you would then get from Aberdeen to the West Coast. You'd go up the top, which of course would merit further upgrades to the A96 corridor, the Aberdeen-Inverness line, and then down the bottom. And again, you can achieve, for the most part, a 100-mile-an-hour railway along this coastline. It is achievable. It absolutely is achievable, with some kinks and compromises based on where you want to put stations, probably the thing that would already minimize this. Now, it is an iconic landscape, but it's also ugly as hell. Like, the Great Glen is beautiful in some places and not. And on the side where the A82 is, there is so much plantation that I think hiding a railway in the cliff would be reasonably straightforward. There would be a lot of arguments against it, do not get me wrong, but the merits, you'd have to build that case around. Think of the benefits. Think of the and again, you build that case by the fact you say your local road network would be so much clearer because you would get rid of most of the HGVs, you'd put the HGVs onto intermodals, you'd get rid of a lot of the long distance tourist traffic, your coaches wouldn't need to be clogging up the road and going slowly, so you'd free up that road for lots more local traffic that has no alternative other than to use the A82. So major benefit along that corridor. It would create an alternative to several pretty dangerous and busy road routes, not just the A82, because you'd be creating bypasses to kind of all the difficult roads that cross the Highlands from the west coast, so from the east coast to the west. So you're creating lots of useful benefits and alternatives by creating that route. It'd be creating a second north-south link to the Highlands from the Central Belt. I suppose a third if you count going via Aberdeen, but basically you're creating another strategic link up to the Highlands, which is good, and just a major bit of tourism. By the merit of creating an 86-kilometre tourist attraction through the Great Glen, that in and of itself would be, Les Chegwin is absolutely right. You'd be freeing up the road for local youths to do some hooning. Quite right. A lot of people say, Polyhazanasbo, sorry, that took me a while. Polyhazanasbo. The northern side of the Great Glen sounds so idyllic in theory and practice is a congested road clinging to the edge of a cliff. Quite. Any remote routes where old North American style electrification might work. Big metalwork with HV disc, possibly. But the thing is, there's already been the upgrades to the HV cabling around here. Zydit is saying the Great Glen Railway would make my life so much easier. Yeah, absolutely. So here we go. Yes, getting it approved would be interesting, but a railway got as far as Fort Augustus in pretty high spec, although it was built very, very stupidly. And essentially, the reason that we don't have this railway already is because the railway companies were awful and could not be trusted and spent most of their history fighting to stop railways being built rather than building railways. Yes, that would be how you do that. You connect up to Fort William, and that gives you your link over to Malling as well. So you get that port connection that direction, but also you link down to Oban if you need it. So that gives you your connection. Major tourist benefit to building that railway. Just enormous tourist benefit. Now, there is one other port that we mentioned earlier, if you remember, and that's Ullapool. The 52-kilometre link from Garve to Ullapool. Now, you might be going, what in the hell are you doing building a railway to Ullapool? And this is where you have to think about our bridge river analogy, right? This is the only major port on the west coast that is not linked by rail. This is a critical link to Stornoway. It's a major hub for maritime industry in the northwest, and it has seen significant growth in tourism in the last decade, not least with the NC 500 stuff, which has put severe strain on the local road network. Roads are now very, very congested, particularly up to Ullapool. Ullapool is also gorgeous, and having a railway would be marvellous. The creation of a new link, 52 kilometres from Garve to Ullapool. Garve, we'll talk about why Garve. Garve is just a bit on the coastline that is the link to is how you would link up to Ullapool. It would enable further tourist growth to be made sustainably, and it would provide a fixed link for industry into Northwest Highlands, the Hebrides and North Atlantic. What in the hell would it look like though? Well, let's whiz up here because so you come out of Inverness, you whiz off on the coastline, and then you hit the bit where the road splits at Garve. The road runs very close to the railway here, and you can see the lovely kind of bullhead rail alignment next to the road. It whizzes off, what is it, A837? Am I fictionalising here? What is it? Let's whiz up here and have a look and remind myself what the road is. No, of course it's not. It's the A835. Of course it's the A835. It's a road I've driven and gone up many, many times myself because I love Assynt. It is unbelievably stunning. So the good thing is the road, again, you can rely on the road here because the road does that Scottish, 80s Scottish road vibes thing of cutting quite a straight line through the terrain. It's a bit tricky here because it's a very, very beautiful bit of river that you'd want to kind of attempt to dodge and take the railway over it a bit further up where it's flatter. But at that point, you basically follow the main road. Not least because the main road is following the river, which itself is also following the kind of the most steady gradient. In this instance, you pick. You can go faster but much steeper. Here it's very steep here. I've cycled down this hill and it's wonderfully fast. You pretty much stop pedaling from here to here. It's great. In fact, even a little bit further. It's just a fantastic cycle, that actually, from Ullapool to Inverness. So you probably actually want to reduce the speed because the gradient would be so severe otherwise. But then following Glascarnoch, nice and straightforward. It gets tricky when you reach Braymore and have to head back down the hill because it is tricky terrain getting the railway down there. But there was a plan for this. There was a former railway plan that kind of is broadly where I've proposed as well. You work your way down the Glen to wonderful Ullapool. And even though it'd be wonderful to have a railway station on the coast here, I suspect the right thing to do is to bring the railway around the back into kind of the industrial estate and actually build up the station here and build up the industrial capacity. So actually have some fairly sizable, some fairly substantial goods facilities here to get things on and off. And that would allow you to get goods running up into Ullapool and making use of the fact that it is a wonderful, sheltered, deep water harbour. So that would be my suggestion of what you need to do. And it would be an incredibly useful link to kind of close out, to get people up into this beautiful part of the country and to avoid a lot of car journeys. H. Murray's asking if there's a rough idea as to how much all of this would cost and whether it'd be feasible to get political traction. Yeah. Well, I can tell you a bit about how much it would probably cost, but I think I'll probably save that for another episode. I'm not going to talk about costs this time because costs are reasonably easy. Value is difficult, as Katie McFenn of this. Katie McFenn? I've Scottishified you, Katie. Katie Fenn of this. Of the crew who joins us here, although not right now, I think, has said a wonderful quote that I like is that it's easy to get costs. Costs are very easy to judge, and yeah, you might understate it, but I would say that for what we're proposing in a minute, I'll tell you. I will give you one number, which is a broad idea of how much it'll cost, but I'm not so fussed. It's not so important. It is a massive political challenge, but I think you need to there's no point going, oh, it's difficult politically, and then not painting a vision of what the future could look like. And that's the trap that the railway and its proponents often fall into, is you need to think about don't think about, oh, it's difficult to do that politically. Think about, what do we actually need the network to look like to achieve the goals the government has set out itself. The Scottish and UK governments have set these goals out. You can only achieve them with rail on these long distance corridors, as we've discussed. It's absolutely necessary. Other people are saying, wouldn't you build a through station near the town centre and have goods trains go onto the industrial estate? That is it is an option. Yeah, you could put the passenger station could go up the hill a bit here, behind the school, and then link down. That is certainly an option. Yeah, as I say, I've gone for a bit of alignment options. I've not gone into super detail about how you develop this. These are done pretty fast for a Scottish Herald article that's coming out soon. But also I knew this episode was coming, so it was a bit of fortuitous timing. So, we've got some other things to say, because I've not talked much about urban enhancements, and there's a reason for that, and it's because there's another episode coming where we talk about Glasgow. But it's worth saying that the dense Scottish Central Belt is the economic engine of Scotland, and it's the only conurbation outside of London that harnesses the agglomeration effect seen in other modern European cities. Because of this dense amount of development, and the fact that you have 4 or 5 high quality electrified railways threading between Edinburgh and Glasgow and beyond. But these lines are congested, capacity is severely constrained, and the urban networks in these two cities aren't great. As I've said elsewhere, counterintuitively, the best way to get more urban capacity is to build our high-speed link, and we've talked about that in episode 222. Now, Glasgow itself already has an expansive suburban rail network, as you all know. Edinburgh does not. Edinburgh, for various reasons, it'd be good if it did. I will do an Edinburgh episode at some point. But both cities require dedicated urban transport networks. There is no metro system in Glasgow other than the little light metro loop that is never going to really be able to be expanded, and it's just going to be a bit of a plaything for a long time. Even if it is, a wonderful little bit of transport interest, you're not going to expand it, you're not going to touch it. There's no point. It's too hard. Well, I'm not going to get into details now, but Glasgow's primary constraint is the lack of a link between its northern and southern urban networks. You need Glasgow Crossrail. And Edinburgh suffers from the severely constrained mainline core between Haymarket and Portobello carrying everything. That's a major challenge. Maximising the effectiveness of each city's rail network requires big thinking, but strategic thinking can provide urban and long distance benefits simultaneously. We've talked about that. So, on a big level, you free up the capacity of the existing railway by building the new high-speed link. And my suggestion would be that you would tunnel that into Edinburgh and build it in amongst the Waverley Mall space, and build dedicated high-speed platforms at Waverley, but on a separate alignment to free up the urban core in kind of through Haymarket and beyond, to allow for more local and urban services. So that's kind of a key thing. And the other thing, though, is, and I'm not ignoring, let me just go to, there we go. Let me just display this, because I'm not ignoring Glasgow, because you'll be glad to hear, there is an episode coming about Glasgow, but I will spoil it by saying Glasgow has a lot of potential, and we'll get there, folks. So we're gonna just park that one for now. But there is, Glasgow. We'll talk about Glasgow itself later. Now, I'm already seeing some great chat going on about some of the gaps. So the network we've described. Let's whiz over here actually. So let's have a look at our final views and sort of see what have we been talking about. The network that we've been describing, in totality, succeeds in linking almost every town larger than 10,000 people with a fixed rail connection, with 3 notable exceptions. We need to talk about these notable exceptions. We're talking about disconnected settlements. One of those disconnected settlements is, I'll tell you what are the 3 disconnected settlements? Let's bring our settlements back. To do that, we need to go back to our construction views. Apologies. Let's bring those settlements back, and those are the 10,000 ones here. Those are St Andrews. There's St Andrews. Those are Forfar. They're north of Dundee. There's Forfar. And West Hill up near Aberdeen. Those are the 3 gaps. They're all, interestingly enough, on the east coast, but that's because that's where most of the population is, because it's where it's flat and verdant. Now, St Andrews could very easily and usefully be linked onto the Fife Outer Suburban Network. So that is very much one of our connections. 8 kilometres, Leuchars to St Andrews. If you were going to do it to Leuchars, I think you'd have it both north and south facing. I would say build a triangle, because it'd be useful to have Dundee to St Andrews as a direct link, not just south facing but north facing. Very usefully you could link it into the Fife Outer Suburban Network, feeding into the Edinburgh bound services, linking the university and golfing town directly to the airport and high speed network. West Hill would, if we go back here, West Hill would quite nicely be connected via trams, because Aberdeen is absolutely of a large enough size to have a tram network. But what about Forfar? Forfar is a bit tricky. And this is a situation where we'll talk about that. To be honest, basically, alongside the other towns that we've talked about, the 5,000 to 10,000 size towns. So if I click this, you'll see there's a few on the east coast that are not connected. Banchory's up here, which is of its own thing. But Yeah, you've got Banchory, you've got Blairgowrie, Kirriemuir, Brechin, and also those down in the borders as well. So you've got Peebles, Selkirk, and Kelso. Rail isn't... You cannot usefully serve these locations with rail, frankly. It would be marvellous if we could, but you can't. Effectively, you would not manage to build an environmental case. This is where bus connectivity fills the gap. Does not mean you abandon these places. This is where you integrate regional and rural bus and train fares and timetables across Scotland and provide those fast links to integrate those into the rail network. I think you would really struggle to justify. You're far better, and we'll come to this theme. The key thing here is you upgrade the existing network, because a shuttle between St Andrews and Dundee or Leuchars is certainly an alternative option. To avoid worrying about dealing with where the train's coming from that reach St Andrews. Yeah, certainly is an option. This is true with the Isles link as well. The value of accelerating trains on the major lines in the existing network, and we'll talk about this shortly. So connecting the major cities is a key theme. The value of accelerating the trains on the major lines really comes when taking account of the benefit this has for people making those journeys with rail as the core, but relying on local transport at one or both ends of the trip. So in that case, you've got the buses. If you're getting the main, you've travelled from London you're travelling from London to Forfar. Okay, you can get to Dundee pretty quickly, but the challenge is if you could do it quicker, then you set every extra minute on the core that you improve on that long distance bit that you improve on rail makes the bus a bit more realistic as well, so long as the bus is frequent and integrated. So speed and frequency are key on the railway to maximise these benefits. So we know that we know that current future population isn't the only factor to consider, but it is a good starting point. So if you just look at the 4 big 100,000 population cities of Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, and Aberdeen. These are absolutely key strategic links, and they all must be linked by 2-track fully electrified railways. There's no avoiding that. They need to be 2-track fully electrified throughout. There's just that just you cannot get sufficient capacity between those cities without doing that. And you should also, by doing that and more work besides, improve speeds to match or better the equivalent journey by car to unlock the maximum modal shift by the second half of the century. Now, journey times are pretty competitive on those lines. The ones I'm talking about, by the way, are it's this lump here. So if I go back to the Scotland, it's these connectors here, so the lines that broadly follow these connections. And journey times are pretty competitive by train versus car today, but capacity is lacking, and as we talked about, the core needs to be even quicker to speed up journeys that rely on those local connections at either end. So upgrades on the Fife line via Cooper may facilitate this, but, and I'm not set on this, I once was, but I'm not sure you need it. It might well be possible. I think one of my main complaints about the current route is actually that you miss Glenrothes. You miss Dunfermline as a key population centre when you head north south. So it may be the case that a direct line, a direct fast line between Dunfermline and Perth is necessary. But you might find that you can achieve this on the existing lines, potentially with more redundancy being built into the network overall. But you might achieve this on the existing lines. You might not. I'm not set on needing the direct line, is the thing. So, yeah, I was going to say, Roaming Autocrat's pointing out that Dundee Forfar has a lot of hills and nothing much in between. It's in the middle of the valley. And they're just not. Yeah, you're just not going to build it's going to be a very expensive railway for very limited clear benefit unless you decided to expand Forfar into a major city. Sorry, we're jumping around a bit. So on these cores, great. I think you can achieve it on the existing network, but you would need major upgrades, serious, far-reaching upgrades. And then, of course, we've talked about the high-speed link. We all know about the high-speed link. Oh, by the way, yes, the St Andrews link is one that I've not plotted out as to how I would do it yet. So that is a gap that I've not plotted, but it is on the network. And it will be in the Scottish Herald piece, so pay close attention to that. Of course, yes, the high-speed link. We've talked about this in episode 222, so I won't dwell on it. Absolutely key, critical link. And also for freeing up all those additional sort of urban services. Oh, we're 15 minutes beyond, but I think we've pretty much got ourselves our answer there. So what was that? That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bits of railway that we've talked about needing. Whew. 6 bits of railway and a total of 403 extra kilometres. Now, people have asked how much would that cost? 403 multiplied by 40. A lot of money. Even if I go conservative and say 20, you're talking about between 8 and 16 billion pounds to achieve that. No, that's the map. We don't need that. Between 8 and 16 billion pounds to build all that. And all of you are now going, what? Yep, that's how much railways cost. That's how much railways cost right now in the UK. You can run. The only way to bring those prices down is to get cracking. Incidentally, this is adding a sizable chunk of extra railway. This is adding 15% to the Scottish railway network. So we're talking about a pretty sizable expansion over through this century. But as I've talked about, there is no other way to provide sustainable links on some of these strategic gaps. This is how you achieve it. This is absolutely how you achieve it. People are asking, so a few questions. Let's get my face up and answer a few questions, shall we? Hello, everyone. Right, so some questions. What about us? So St Andrew's Shuttle, Kerr suggested, yep. Gregor McCabery, hello Gregor, hello Kirsty as well. Loud yay for trams serving Aberdeen, yep. Trams and zero emissions bus linking services and cycle and walking routes, absolutely. There should be trams in Dundee, in Edinburgh, Glasgow and Aberdeen, zero doubt. The old Brechin's actually easier to link up as part of the, yeah. The trouble is, the old railway, in fact, there's a heritage railway that at least did go to Brechin. I don't know if it still does. It'd be nice if it did. That's lovely, but it's, again, I think bus is more effective on that front. And certainly, the A90 provides that fast bus link, particularly if you then get rid of one of the lanes and make it a bus-only line. That'd be controversial. Ho-ho! So, let's go down through and ask some of these questions. Zaida is asking, is there a link from HS2 to allow trains to continue north, skipping Aberdeen or turn back, skipping out Edinburgh or turn back? No. Just go to Edinburgh and Glasgow, and then you'd rely on the existing network to do everything else. And you then get more frequency on regional services. And by doing so, you'd still reduce generalised journey times, even if you didn't have direct trains from Aberdeen to London anymore. So the next one is Kerr's asking, does high speed going up the Dumfries route and then tunnelling under one lock to Lanark-ish reduce your base tunnelling? So quite possibly, yes, actually. But yeah, that's if we get back to the. Actually, you can't see the map anyway. Yes, go back to 222 where we talk a bit about it. But you're right, it might do. Sam W is saying similar to Crossrail. That might be a Glasgow reference there, actually. Oh, similar to Crossrail. Oh, I'm not quite sure what that's in reference to, but anyway. Forget the cost. Look at the benefits, financial and societal. Absolutely. Brechin still has its heritage railway, but it might just be a few pacers. Yeah, quite. I once crashed into a flight of pheasants outside of Brechin. I would not recommend. Oh, crikey, don't do that. There should be no future for domestic flights in Scotland. Well, you need some Isles connectivity, right? Which that's the only thing that might realistically be achieved by zero emissions flights. But yeah, for the most part. Oh, Lewis Bergen is asking, Edinburgh Waverley International for European rail links? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm assuming that we will build our HS2 link onwards by this point. We're talking about the second half of the 20th century. So much will have gone on by this point that we'll have had to think very differently, whether it's massive rise of sweeping fascism across the planet and we've had World War III or whatever it happens to be, we'll be in a different place by this point and we'll have be focusing ourselves either by necessity from climate change or by post-war reconstruction. We'll be getting busy with rebuilding our society to be in a bit of a better shape. How would one get these disconnected towns emissions-free buses? Battery hybrid trolley. Battery buses, if you're going to use batteries, then I would say buses are a very good way to deploy that lithium. Don't put it in trains. Certainly don't put it in cars, or don't put it in like-for-like replacement of cars. Yes, put it in cars, but put it in far fewer cars than we have today. That's the way you would achieve that. Larkhall Lanark via Lesmagau link work. So it's getting into the reeds of Glasgow. I'm just going to say there are potentially lots of less strategic links that might fall into this a bit, but I have for the most part stuck with the strategic links that are nationally strategic. Local pressure might suggest that alternatives are necessary, but I've not looked at those. I have just looked strategically and what you can achieve strategically, looking at the kind of the description of network development I have done here. So that is people are asking about Edinburgh Newcastle. I think you stick with the existing railway. because it's still pretty fast between Edinburgh and Newcastle. And so you increase the frequency. By the fact that they're not all having to be fast London trains, you can actually increase the frequency of trains on that line and actually do a really good job do a really good job of making it actually a better link without a high-speed line between Edinburgh and Newcastle. And you can speed that line up with a few bits of corner cutting and such like as well. Whew. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot to say... So, actually, I didn't forget to say anything. That's kind of where we're at. Right. I am 2 episodes late already on audio-only versions. I'm so sorry. It's just a case of sitting down and processing them and putting them up, and I just haven't got back into the swing of it quite yet. Do line up more questions, by the way. But yes, thanks for listening, everyone in audio-only form. Available on all good podcasting platforms. The usual plugs: GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise, PayPal.me/GarethDennis for loose change and abuse, Patreon.com/GarethDennis for supporting me to make all of this happen. I am overdue an update to the ticker of all the people who support me on Patreon. Thank you so much. As I've been promising, news on that front inbound next week. So, and of course, the chat continues ad infinitum on GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord. Pester me for KML files. I'm quite willing to share those, so pester me. The book, it's still selling. Thank you so much. It's very much hitting bestsellers list. Actually, it's dropped down on the bestsellers list for... It's now dropping a bit in the US, but it's still doing very well in the UK. And more interviews, and then of course tour is coming up. So lots more fun to have with the book. The book is not done yet, as it were. More to be done, more to run. DW2IP for now still a guest host. That'll be winding down as job ramps up. But W2IP, some wonderful episodes in the bank. More to come. And then of course just listen to it anyway because they're lovely. And I want to highlight the fact that I was on We're Not So Different podcast with Luke and Dr. Yaniga. It was a fab episode, and what were we talking about? We were talking about Rail 200. We were talking about why the railways are not 200 years old, why it's very silly to say that, and why it's actually quite boring to say that. And there's lots of interesting history that we're ignoring if we say that railways are 200 years old. That doesn't mean that Rail 200 is rubbish. No, not at all. But... it does mean that things like the tweet that the official account did recently saying railways are 200 years old are bobbins, annoying, and should be called out. It's very important that their social media team don't say stuff like that because it's not true, and actually it's very convenient because it makes rail look sort of transient, whereas rail is kind of just the actual default way humans have moved stuff around as our civilization's developed. Heavy stuff. So, We're Not So Different podcast. Well worth dropping in on that. It's a lovely episode. Free to access, go get stuck in, and give him a shout. Tell him what you thought as well. Do say love this episode. Thanks for having him on and that sort of thing. Because they put a lot of effort into allowing me to be on as a guest. It's very kind of them, and they should get some numbers as a result. Although I think they probably get much bigger numbers than we do here in our lovely little rail natter. There's all like 250 people who are watching this at one point. Anyway, next week I've not put a picture in the background, but it is finally going to be the news episode. A lot of things have happened, and we should talk about them. Yes, some news to be discussed. All of the news. Good grief, there's a lot of news. Yeah, that'll be fun. And then I wonder what we're going to do for episode 250. Because, of course, next week is the 250th episode of Rail Natter, despite being episode 249. So that's kind of fun. But no, episode 250 follows. And I do need to do some awards at some point. Good grief. But that would involve me updating the spreadsheet, which I'm also way behind on. Good grief. So... whew. Said some stuff there. I hope you enjoyed that. There was another question, which was... there are a few detail-y questions, but hopefully... we covered a lot of stuff there. Bus re-regulation is a key part of this. And in Scotland, where all the bus barons are king, have fun with that. But bus deregulation is a critical thing for Scotland to do to make all this work. Other than that, everyone... we're 24 minutes beyond the hour, which is completely unacceptable. It only remains for me to sort of say, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope that was enjoyable. There's plenty there to chew through. I will see you next week. And much, it's going to be 2025 should be a fun year. We need to do more expansion of our one true official and good railway map, right? So the more of these alignments I add, the more that the map gets more complete for GB. Well, actually for UK, because we do have some stuff over on... oh, in fact, not even for the UK. For the North Atlantic archipelago, more and more appears. Anyway... On which fun I wave. Everyone, cheerio!